Hello. The Divine Code reading for July 13th, pages 71 and 72. The fact that male Gentiles are allowed to have themselves circumcised as a spiritual observance, even though it is meant to be a sign in the flesh of a Jew, is not problematic. One reason, since many Gentiles practice circumcision for medical purposes and not in order to add a commandment or a new religion. And B, furthermore, the Gentile descendants of Keturah were commanded to observe circumcision, from which we can conclude that this commandment is not exclusively for the Jews. So, non-Jews are allowed, there's a unique quality to the mitzvah of circumcision, to the commandment to the Jewish people in the Bible of circumcision, that non-Jews can take that on. The allowance is because it was allowed to people outside. We know it's allowed to people outside of the Jews. There's specifically to Keturah, and there's other groups that were shown in the Bible to be allowed circumcision. And therefore, today, where people either in Arab country, in the Muslim countries that practice circumcision, understanding it as a religious precept, and in Western Christian countries that understand, that take it, well, the only logical reason is that it came out of the Bible. I'm not sure the history of circumcision in the West. I don't think the cultural understanding is because of medical reasons. It's because people read it in the Bible, and in certain aspects of Western culture, it was taken on as a custom. Therefore, any Gentile male who wishes to be circumcised in order to refine himself is permitted to do so. But if he is not descended from a son of Abraham and Keturah, that's Abraham's second wife. He had, I think, five sons, and they went to the east, and they would have been commanded in circumcision. He should be informed that he has no obligation or commandment to do this, and that he should only do it for the sake of the command. He should not do it. He should not do it for the sake of the commandment, but rather only to refine his personality and his body and his desires. So here the Divine Code is giving, at the beginning of today's reading, it says the Gentiles may do this as a spiritual observance. And then we understand, I guess they're defining spiritual observance as refining refining his personality and his bodily desires. That would be the spiritual observance that's being allowed to non-Jews. This will have to be, this entire chapter needs to be rewritten in a way that regular people pick it up, can understand what's being said here. Because normally when people think of spiritual observance, they're thinking of it being done in a religious manner. And the average person who's, the cultural areas of culture that understand circumcision, they understand it as a religious thing. Much more so in the Muslim nations, but also in the Western nations. If you ask the culture, why are they circumcising? I don't know how many of them would say they're doing it because of medical reasons, or if they historically understand it as medical reasons. My guess, and that's all I have because I'm not sure if any studies have been done in this area, my guess would be that there's a religious understanding of circumcision, that they're doing it because it's in the Bible, and how that came into Western thought, I don't know. It appears that there is a reason for a Gentile to be circumcised, as we find that the children of Jacob circumcised the people of Shechem, albeit with deceit, and Joseph circumcised the Egyptians, even though he may have done so because they were his servants. This is explained in Lakute Sikot, volume 10, page 139. Nevertheless, it is clear that if this were not something that could be logically adopted by the people of Shechem and Egypt, they would not have been persuaded to do so. This is also clear from Tractate of Avodah Zarah 65a, a ger toshav who wishes to circumcise himself. For seemingly a Gentile should be informed outright not to circumcise himself, instead of being allowed to possibly stumble by reneging on his promise. The reason for this is, as Rabbeinu Bachai writes concerning Genesis 17:13, that circumcision is comparable to offering a desirable sacrifice of one's body to God, and it can also accomplish a weakening of cardinal desires. Guide to Perplexed, part 3, chapter 49. The reasons are upright for every man, both Gentile and Jew, for this purpose of controlling his nature, and likewise as a sacrificial offering which righteous Gentiles are permitted to do. Therefore, if a Gentile wishes to have a circumcision for these reasons, it is not as an obligation of observing a commandment. This is praiseworthy. The reason why the city of Shechem, if they were taking on the allowance to live in the land of Israel. Now they already lived there, but Jacob's family was explaining that in order for them to live peacefully, the city would have to be circumcised. This is a religious requirement that they were placing upon the city of Shechem. They were essentially converting the city of Shechem. In Egypt, and in Shechem, they were being offered the opportunity to intermarry. So this was clearly they were being brought into the covenant. In that case, in the land of Egypt, it's clear that these people were taking on a servant status. And when the Egyptians were taking on a servant status, circumcision was part of becoming a servant, unless it was understood at the beginning that it would take on the status of a ger toshav servant, which in this midrashic exclamation, that's not being discussed. In Avodah Zarah, from what I recall, they're referring to a person that is taking on the status of an Eved Kanani. The Eved Kanani is to be circumcised within 12 months, or there's different ways of understanding, but basically, if at the point of becoming an Eved and becoming a slave, normally the slave would be taken on as a status of an Eved Kanani, which is practically on a Jewish level. And the commandments for the Eved Kanani have nothing to do with what's being talked about in the Divine Code. So I'm not sure why that's even being brought in this footnote. The Eved Kanani status is on a level almost like a Jew. Whereas the Ger Toshav status, the Ger Toshav Eved, would be what we would identify with the person in the Divine Code. He'd be closer to the person in the Divine Code. Where he's just taken on 7 mitzvahs and that's all he's taken on. He's not taken on circumcision. He's not taken on anything else. So the Eved the Ger Toshav by definition does not take on the mitzvah circumcision. The Eved Kanani does, and he apparently has 12 months. And if he decides not to follow through on it because people they get timid about that kind of stuff, then he's put back into the status of being just a regular non-Jew. That would be like the Ger Toshav status, which is not the end of the world. It just means that now he's back into the category. The Ger Toshav status would be the category of the people discussed in the Divine Code. But apparently, a non-Jew, according to the Divine Code, a non-Jew can take on the circumcision. There's some question as to why he would be able to take it on. Apparently, he can take it on from what's being said in the main text. He can take it on for the purpose of a religious observance. He can take it on as a sacrifice, a sacrificial offering, which that's more of a metaphorical sacrificial offering. It's not a proper sacrificial offering because it's very limited what a non-Jew can do sacrificially. But ideally, and this is what's being expressed in the Divine Code in a roundabout way. Ideally, the non-Jew should understand that the side benefits, the tam is often mistakenly understood as the reason for the mitzvah. It's not the reason for the mitzvah. The tam is the benefits that occur with the mitzvah. It's technically it's more properly translated as taste, which is also a metaphorical terminology. But the taste of the mitzvah is the benefit, the side benefits that come from the mitzvah. And we, as non-Jews, are allowed to do things for the sake of the tam, for the sake of the benefits that come from the logical reasoning that occurs with the mitzvah. So the logical reasoning, often called tam, is that circumcision refines the person. Ask a rabbi to explain that. The Gentile may perform a Jewish commandment from which he receives a practical benefit, even if only indirectly, such as tithing for charity, which is for the benefit of society since it supports the poor, and is a matter of logic necessitates, or returning a lost object, which helps establish camaraderie, or sending away a mother bird before taking his young, which is having pity on animals. Since these actions have benefit for him personally or for the society as a whole that he lives in, they have a measure of practical justification, and it receives reward for performing them, both the practical benefit and the reward from heaven for doing a correct and good deed. So we're seeing three different benefits, thereabouts. Three different benefits. One is the benefit that he receives if he does something and there's a direct benefit to himself, such as the exclamation of circumcision being for the sake of self-refinement. We could also say that charity also has the concept of self-refinement. Charity might be an area where we can look at all three. Charity refines the self. If I give charity, it's giving me a better outlook in life. It makes me a better person if I give charity. It helps me to have discipline, self-discipline with my finances also. If I take, a certain percentage of my income and I give that income to charity, then that gives me a different outlook on money in general, on things in general. It also has the benefit of creating a better society. If a person gives money, they're creating better society, which, a rising tide lifts all boats. So if I'm helping to make it a better society, that's going to benefit myself in an indirect way. And then we have the reward from heaven for doing a correct and good deed. He has this person also, there's an aspect of reward from heaven. And from what I understand, this reward can go into the spiritual afterlife. When a person passes away and he's looking, his life is laid out before him. The fact that the person gives charity or other similar good deeds can benefit the person. And likewise, things that he shouldn't have done in life would not help the person. So there is a benefit that occurs in the afterlife for the person by what he does in this world. However, a Jewish commandment that has no physical effect on a person or society, such as putting on phylacteries or wearing tizzits fringes, accomplishes nothing for a Gentile. It follows that a Gentile would do this only because he desires to do a godly commandment that he is not commanded, and thus he is adding a religion. He therefore receives no reward for this, and on the contrary, he would be committing a transgression that carries liability to punishment by the hand of heaven. So if in areas where there's no practical benefit, it wouldn't necessarily be refining himself, although oftentimes the Tom given, the logical reasoning given for many of these spiritual commandments shows an area of refining of self. That's because it's a commandment. They're doing a commandment, and because it's a commandment, it has these benefits. Otherwise, psychiatrists would never come up with the idea of putting on tefillin in order to make a person better. It would never enter into human reasoning to do that, while as giving charity could be seen as a way of benefiting the self and benefiting society. So it's areas that are clear that these are beneficial, that are encouraged, and areas that have no rationale beyond it being a divine commandment that is prohibited to the non-Jew. And there can actually be a spiritual harm for the person, as opposed to the charity that would give a spiritual benefit to the person. Halakha number 8. The above mentioned rule applies only to Jewish commandments that are not duty bound by logic, even if they have a logical reason, such as circumcision or tithes. However, those that are duty bound by logic, such as honoring one's parents, and kindness and charity, are obligated to be kept because such is the correct way for a person to act as benefiting the image of God in which he was created. Concerning parents, Silukute Sikut, Volume 5, page 154, it is possible that honoring parents is an intellectual obligation on a Gentile, such as charity, which is necessary for the establishment of a proper society and proper laws, dinim. However, it is obvious that a Gentile is forbidden to embarrass his parents, since it is against logical human respect, as we see from the story of Ham, that's Genesis 9:20-22, who disgraced his father Noach, and see Pirkei Rabbi Elazar, chapter 23, Ibn Ezra on Deuteronomy 21:13, letter of Netziv, Rabbi Naftali Zvi Yehuda Berlin, and his approbation to the book Avot Chesed of the Chafetz Chaim. So we find that the honoring of parents, and especially the prohibition against embarrassing a parent, is understood to be intellectually beneficial to the person. It's an obligation not to embarrass the parent, and it's a intellectual encouragement in the area of honoring the parents, from what I understand. And charity, see Ricoli 366, who appears to say that if Gentiles are obligated in escorting guests when they leave, referring to inviting guests as well, since it is a logical obligation. So escorting guests and inviting guests is an intellectual obligation, and that's connected with kindness and charity. However, a Gentile may not keep them because it is a commandment from God, but rather because he is obligated to be a good and moral person. So the understanding has to be that he's doing it because it's the right thing to do, not because God commanded him to do it in the Torah. But many of the things that God commanded the Jews to do in the Torah are logically good things to do, and in those cases, the non-Jew should follow it. Likewise, many prohibitions that are commanded upon Jews are obligations for Gentiles to observe based on logic, such as the prohibition against hating others, taking revenge, or bearing a grudge. A Gentile should observe these prohibitions out of human decency and not divine commandments on their own. This duty is an absolute obligation upon Gentiles. So an absolute obligation, it's in a certain sense, it's like a commandment. It's not optional. Some things are optional, other things are not optional. And in these areas, it's something we definitely should do. We're just not supposed to see that we're doing a mitzvah, a commandment in the Torah that's given to the Jews. We don't see it in that manner when we do it. We do it because, well, it's a subset of the laws of Dinam, that we're creating a just society, a good society. And they are liable to be punished for transgressing these obligations and for acting against the moral and logical ways of practice, as the generation of the flood was punished in the days of Noah. And that's explained according to Ramban on Genesis 6:2 and 6:13, and Chazini there on 7:21. And yeah, there are cases that are shown in the book of Genesis where the nations are punished for various things. We know that Sodom and Gomorrah was punished because they didn't give charity. That's explained in the book of Ezekiel. It's necessary, and this is really connected to the laws of Dinam. It's necessary for societies to behave in a generally proper manner. These are understood as obligations that are incumbent upon us. Thank you.